With help from Mel Leonor and Michael Stratford, Alexander looms large over K-12 education. Sen. Lamar Alexander made a phone call this summer that quickly changed how Education Secretary Betsy DeVos was enforcing the law governing how public schools are held accountable for educating kids. The Tennessee Republican had publicly and privately admonished a top aide to DeVos, instructing the aide that the law requires the federal government to keep its hands largely off state education policy. When Alexander's complaints fell on deaf ears, he called DeVos directly. "She thanked me for it," Alexander, the chairman of the Senate Education Committee, told Politico. Caitlin Emmer has the story. Story continued below. Soon after the call, the Education Department said it was changing how it reviews state education plans developed under the law, possibly shielding the biggest federal concerns from public view by first conveying them in telephone calls with state officials rather than on paper. The review and questioning of states became less intense throughout the summer. Speculation swirled that the Trump appointee whom Alexander blasted, Jason Botel, was leaving the agency or switching jobs. Botel's public critiques of state education plans, once lengthy and probing, now mostly ask for missing information or clarifications. Alexander's intervention at the Education Department shows how he uses his clout to steer DeVos' agency and shape policy on a defining piece of his legacy, a major bipartisan rewrite of federal education law called the Every Student Succeeds Act. He said he feels like his intervention helped the department from going off track. A senior GOP aide said the agency stopped giving bad advice to states and stopped questioning matters that belong to state school officials, like setting goals for students and education systems. "Our concerns about Jason have diminished a lot," the aide said. He seems to have gotten the message. When asked if he requested in a phone call that DeVos go so far as to remove Botel, Alexander said, "No, I don't think I did. I just didn't like the decisions that he was making, and I didn't try to tell her who she should have in any particular job." Virginia Rep. Bobby Scott, the top Democrat on the House Education and the Workforce Committee, said he can't remember another example of when a lower-level official was called out in such a way. "Usually if you're going to have a disagreement with the Education Department, then you're going to have a disagreement with the Cabinet Secretary," Scott said. Alexander, after Trump's election, also worked to find an education secretary who would uphold his state-centric, hands-off vision for the Every Student Succeeds Act. And he led the congressional effort to scrap an Obama rule for holding schools accountable under the law. But some worry that Alexander's actions could translate into little to no federal oversight of state education. Critics note the law imposed certain requirements to protect poor and minority students, whose performance often lags behind their peers. They worry whether states will adequately track and provide equal opportunities for at-risk kids who face consequences from the Education Department if they fail to do so. Good Wednesday morning, and happy almost Thanksgiving. I'm splitting the week between my in-laws' house in western New York and my parents' house in central Massachusetts. And I'm very much looking forward to eating this Thanksgiving classic mashed sweet potatoes with melted marshmallows. Happy Thanksgiving from the Pro Education team. We're thankful for our readers every day. Talk turkey at Semmer@Politico.com or at Caitlin Zemmer. Send events to educalendar@politicopro.com. And follow us on Twitter at Morning Edu and at PoliticoPro. Programming note: Morning Education will not publish from November 23rd, November 26th. Our next Morning Education newsletter will publish on November 27th. Please continue to follow Pro Education issues here. Mark your calendar. Politico is partnering with women-owned businesses in the DC metro area to offer a full week of exclusive perks in conjunction with the 5th Annual Women Rule Summit. Join the fun at participating businesses during Women Rule Week, November 27th to December the 1st, for exclusive deals, and tweet 5x using Women Rule for a chance to win 2 free tickets to the summit on December 5th. Listen to the latest Women Rule podcast featuring Glamour editor-in-chief Cindy live here. DC official moves to reform school discipline. A proposal made this week by District of Columbia Council member David Grosso would limit out-of-school suspensions for students across grade levels in charter and district-run schools. The bill would ban out-of-school suspensions for students in kindergarten through the 8th grade, with an exception for threats or acts of physical or emotional injury. If a student is suspended, the bill would guarantee he or she receive an education outside school and require educators to create a plan for the student's return to the classroom. The bill also bans out-of-school suspensions for minor offenses among high school students. Grosso, who chairs the council's education committee, noted the disproportionate use of suspensions among black students in the district, and said reforming the way students are disciplined could help keep more young people out of the criminal justice system. Every student has a right to an education, which suspensions and expulsions potentially deprive them of, Grosso said in a written statement. Even as we are in the midst of a citywide campaign to encourage every student to attend school every day, thousands of students are pushed out of school buildings each year as a result of excessive use of exclusionary discipline practices. The proposal also calls on the district's education officials to boost support for educator training on trauma, mindfulness and restorative justice. Grosso said he also supports increasing funding for behavioral health staff in D.C. schools. Next month, the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights plans to hold a public hearing on the intersection of students of color and students with disabilities, and school discipline policies. Commissioners will hear from affected individuals, community and advocacy groups, and academics, according to a commission spokesman. The hearing starts at 9 a.m. ET on December 8. Speaking of school discipline, Finding Common Ground, the president of the Thomas B. Fordham Institute, a conservative education think tank, is calling on education wonks in a new op to lower the temperature around the debate over school discipline reform. Michael Petrilli helped organize a meeting last week among teachers, parents and federal education officials to discuss scrapping Obama-era guidance aimed at ensuring school districts aren't discriminating against students while disciplining them. News of the meeting exploded, indicating the Trump administration's interest in going after another high-profile Obama policy directive. Civil rights advocates late last week called on the Trump administration to maintain the 2014 Obama directive, which was meant to combat a systemic problem that low-income students, minorities and students with disabilities are often disciplined, suspended and expelled more often than the white, more affluent peers. Conservatives praised the Trump administration for hearing from teachers who felt the directive made their schools less safe. Several of the teachers who met with education department officials had previously been attacked by students. Petrilli, who left the Republican Party and changed his party registration to unaffiliated earlier this year, writes that progressives and conservatives should find common ground when it comes to school discipline reform. Conservatives need to recognize that when African American and Latino students are suspended or expelled at 3 to 4 times the rate of their white peers, it is bound to raise suspicions about discrimination and systemic racism, he writes. We cannot ignore the possibility that some of this is caused by bias, implicit or otherwise. Progressives need to understand that conservatives have a valid point when we worry about schools responding badly to new discipline mandates and becoming unsafe and disorderly, he continues. Teachers and students need to feel secure in their classrooms, and all kids deserve an environment that's conducive to learning. Where we can find common ground is in the view that suspensions and expulsions should be as rare as possible and that schools need to be as safe as possible. These values may feel like they are competing, but many great schools have found ways to thread this needle. Peter Cunningham, who was a top aide to Education Secretary Arne Duncan during the Obama administration, tweeted in response, "You call for common ground but insist we rescind 2014 guidance. Sorry, but guidance beats absence of guidance, which led to war zones, zero tolerance and extreme inequity in discipline. Stop calling guidance mandates and stop calling for accountability unless you mean it." How states will dole out new block grant funds when it comes to a new block grant created by the Every Student Succeeds Act. The majority of states plan to dole out their funds by formula. 8 states will distribute the funds to school districts on a competitive basis, and 1 state, Massachusetts, will use a hybrid method. That's according to an analysis by the Bernstein Strategy Group, a government relations firm that represents a coalition of advocates that wants maximum funding for the block grant. 2 states, Colorado and Minnesota, didn't respond to the inquiry. The block grant, known as the Student Support and Academic Enrichment Grant, was authorized at $1.6 billion and could be used by states for student health and safety programs, better technology in schools and more. But the program only received $400 million in fiscal 2017. Congress included language that would allow states to distribute the money to districts on a competitive basis so they could receive larger allocations and make more meaningful investments. More from Bernstein Strategy Group. Study high school courses lead to STEM success in college. Texas students who took higher-level math and science courses in high school were more likely to declare and persist in a STEM major at 2- and 4-year colleges. That's according to a new study by Rel Southwest, a research laboratory funded by the Education Department's Institute of Education Sciences. Students with better high school attendance rates were also more likely to declare a STEM major in college and complete their degree. These patterns were seen across Hispanic and white students. But the study noted that Hispanic high school students are less likely to participate in rigorous math and science courses than their white peers, which could explain why Hispanic students are less likely to declare and persist in a STEM major in college. The study. In case you missed it, Harvard lawyers question DOJ probe. Attorneys for Harvard University are questioning the Justice Department's probe into the university's admissions practices, calling it an irregular decision to investigate a years-old complaint in a letter obtained by Politico. The Justice Department, in letters reported by the Wall Street Journal on Tuesday, accused Harvard of failing to cooperate with a civil rights investigation into the university's use of race in admissions. The department said it may file a lawsuit if Harvard refuses to turn over documents by December 1. But the university says it's worried about protecting the confidentiality of students and applicants during the investigation. Michael Stratford has more. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau on Tuesday accused Citibank of misleading student loan borrowers about tax benefits, incorrectly charging late fees and other practices it says violated federal consumer protection law. Citibank has agreed to pay a $2.75 million civil penalty, pay $3.75 million in borrower refunds and make changes to its servicing practices to resolve the allegations. More. Movers and shakers. The Education Department has hired a deputy press secretary. Evelyn Stouffer joined the agency late last month, according to a list of Trump education hires obtained through a Freedom of Information Act request. Stouffer started with the Trump administration as Deputy Director of Strategic Communications for the Department of Health and Human Services, according to LinkedIn. Before that, she worked on communications and public policy for Koch Industries, the business owned by the conservative billionaire brothers Charles G. and David H. Koch. Brent Colburn, the vice president for communications at the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative and a former Obama administration official, has been named Princeton University's vice president for communications and public affairs. Syllabus. To back up claim that schools must change, Davis cites mad-up statistic about the future of work. Chalkbeat. Missouri governor's push to remake state education hierarchy stumbles as state board splits over firing state education commissioner. St. Louis Post-Dispatch. University of Michigan takes step toward letting white supremacist Richard Spencer speak. Detroit Free Press. Policymakers agree virtual schools should get more teachers and less money. Will they make it happen? Chalkbeat. Congress speeds toward shutdown over Dreamers. Politico. Tennessee Education Commissioner to convene third task force as state seeks to get testing right. Chalkbeat. Lawsuit alleges Texas Education Agency's special education director tried to cover up abuse claims. KVUE. Where does Michigan's Every Student Succeeds Act application stand? Education Week. It's a cold and wet November dawn, but the pro-education team will keep me warm. At Caitlin Semmer at Politico.com, at Keffeling at Politico.com, at Ms. Stratford Stratford at Politico.com, and at Benjamin U. Bermond at Politico.com.